Welcome to this special election edition of 7:30 NT. I'm Louisa Rebgetz. I'm joined by the leaders of the two major parties for a debate as the Territory prepares to go to the polls tomorrow. Paul Henderson and Terry Mills, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Louisa. Hi, Louisa.
We're coming to the end of 3 weeks of pretty heavy campaigning from both sides. Firstly, Terry Mills. The entire basis of your campaign has been accountability and reducing debt, but Treasury has found a $100 million hole in your election promises over the 4-year term. So, in fact, the Territory economy would be in more debt under a CLP government.
As I said, I'd be fully accountable, and we would make it very clear that we have a very real plan to deal with the debt problems in the Northern Territory. And I won't be distracted from the real debt problem in the Northern Territory, which under Labor has grown to $3 billion and then expanding out to $6 billion. But
how do you explain these problems in the costings?
I acknowledge that there is a dispute, but nonetheless, I am very confident in our costings. But the bottom line is that we are fully accountable. So what I have said is made available for all Territorians to judge. And we have a plan to deal with the debt problems in the Northern Territory. And if we don't achieve that, then Territorians will have to make that decision. We've put our costings up on the website so people can see that. Labor hasn't done that.
But Terry Mills, if there's such a hole, I mean, are your election promises not going to be met, or are you not going to be able to bring the government, the economy into budget into surplus?
I am confident in our position. It's fully funded and fully costed, and these commitments that have been made will be honoured.
So you have little faith in Treasury?
As I said, that there is some dispute, and I don't mind having that discussion with Treasury. Confident in those figures, and I believe that the path that we've set, which is a commitment to live within our means, we can achieve that within 4 years.
Given what you're saying, don't you think public servants will be even more anxious now with all the talk about job cuts, about the prospects of job cuts, because, I mean, there is this money, there is this hole in the costings?
Well, so is asserted, but I still remain very confident in our position. And also part of our plan is not only dwelling with the need to be more efficient in terms of the processes of government, but to make sure that we grow our economy and not just focus on one particular project. And we have the capacity, by putting trust in Territorians who are involved in the Great Territory story, to grow the Territory and to increase productivity in the Northern Territory. I have faith in Territorians, and I'm confident in the position that we have, and I believe that by making that target, that goal, and Territorians have been invited to keep us to account. In 4 years' time, if we don't achieve that, it's their call. But to live within our means, to exercise fiscal discipline, is the objective of a sensible, responsible government.
Paul Henderson, during the campaign, how much of a setback was the Ken Vowles incident to your party, which saw one of the head men behind the scenes stood down? What sort of dent do you think that's put in your campaign?
Look, Louisa, before I get to that, I do have to make comment on the debt issue. Terry Mills has run an entire campaign about being accountable, and Treasury has blown your accountability right out of the window, Terry. It's worse than just the $124 million, Louisa. The first point of Terry's commitments to Territorians is to bring the budget to surplus over the first term of government. That's $700 million. He has not said how he is going to do that. Treasury have got a massive hole in the costings that he's provided. The only way that he can bring the budget back to surplus by his very own costings is to slash the jobs of thousands of public servants. Treasury have shredded your contract, Terry. It's not worth the paper it's written on, and it's a great con job.
Well, you're talking about there's been a big hole here, mate, and that hole has been created by Labor. The size of the Territory debt is monstrous, and you've tried to conceal this from view. Territorians can see it. You've got to live within your means. Now, in terms of surplus, we're talking simply about exercising fiscal discipline to live
what you've said in your contracts.
Your means.
That's not what you've said in your contract, Terry.
Less than you earn.
Your promises are going to increase the debt of the Northern Territory, not reduce it. That's what Treasury have said.
Paul Henderson, how will you?
Well, I'll tell you what. What about what Treasury has? Are you going to talk about what Treasury has said about exposing people going to the home market to a risky loan scheme where they don't carry any deposit responsibilities. What effect does that have? What did Treasury say about that, Paul? Do you recall that?
Terry Mills,
We'll get to that
in the Treasury statement, they also raise issues about your housing scheme, saying that it will put upward pressure, or has the possibility to put upward pressure on the market as well.
And I don't agree with that, because unlike the Labor scheme, which actually adds pressure on demand by bringing more capital into the marketplace, having the potential to increase the price because you're making it easier for people to get in by removing the requirement for a deposit. The real issue is to increase supply, and that's what our measure does, to provide real subsidies for those key workers and apprentices to get into affordable rents, because we need them here. We can't afford to lose 4,000 more people from the Territory. We need them to help us build the Territory.
Paul Henderson, how will you rein in debt while we're on this issue?
Well, obviously, as the economy grows, then the revenue and receipts to government grow. Our debt position is manageable, it is responsible, and it is all about protecting Territory jobs, and that's why we took, after 8 surplus budgets in a row, the decision to go into deficit to protect Territory jobs. And as I've said, you know, Terry's being a bit clever with the words here. You go to your own contract, Terry. You have committed in that first dot point to bring the budget back to surplus over those 4 years. You need to find $700 million on top of the $124 million black hole that Treasury have said. Terry, those are your words, they're not my words. The only way you can do that is slash thousands of jobs, just as Campbell Newman's doing in Queensland.
I don't believe you. I am convinced of our position, and I believe that we can grow
your
the
words
Northern
are your
Territory.
contracts.
That's right, and Territorians will hold us to account. You still haven't given any explanation or any commitment to a plan to get ourselves into a sustainable financial position in the Northern Territory.
Well, Terry, the simple
Where's your
answer to
plan?
that is we've got a growing economy, and we needed to keep capacity in our economy here by having the largest public infrastructure program in the Territory's history, to keep all of those tradies in jobs, to keep all of those subbies in jobs, to keep all of those small business people in jobs whilst they were waiting for the major projects to come. That was a deliberate decision, and everybody in the business community has applauded the government on taking that position.
Well, it looks very much like you are borrowing money at huge amounts, $1 million a day interest, and you are borrowing money not for infrastructure because the borrowing level is greater than the infrastructure spend. And are you borrowing money to pay for wages, Paul? That's never been explained by you.
Not at all.
Why are you borrowing more than you are spending on infrastructure then?
Terry, you could take 40% off the infrastructure budget and the budget would be in surplus tomorrow. But if you take 40% off the infrastructure budget, what happens? That's 1,000 people in the private sector who would lose their jobs and dozens of business close their doors. We're not going to do that. Our debt position is 11% of GDP. The Australian government's debt position per GDP is 9%. Greece is 168%. This is entirely manageable.
Well, let's come back to the Territory here. And Terry Mills, while we're on the issue of jobs, and job cuts has obviously been a prominent theme throughout this election campaign. I mean, in a public service town, how wise was it to leave yourself open, as you've done, on the issue of public service job cuts?
You have to be honest with Territorians, unlike Labor, who have no semblance of a plan to deal with a very serious economic problem, a financial problem.
Well, what's your plan on public service job cuts?
The first one is to be honest. To be honest with Territorians. We haven't had that level of honesty from Paul Henderson.
Absolutely.
Because he still hasn't answered how is it that you are borrowing more money than you are spending on infrastructure.
It's absolutely wrong.
What is the rest for? You are borrowing huge amounts, and it only looks like you're borrowing to pay for public service wages.
Wrong. We could cut the capital works budget by 40%. We would be in surplus tomorrow.
The answer to your question, though, is a commitment to ensure that all those who operate in the public service are focused on frontline service delivery, no matter where you are in the public service. Why a number was picked was to indicate that our interest is in those who are in the managerial positions and those executive contract positions.
So those are the ones you're going to sack?
Oh, go on. It was to ensure that they understood that their role is to be involved in delivering services through the public service for frontline service delivery. Now, I would expect, and I wouldn't be surprised to find that there will be a number of those, not that many, but those that are there and employed at our expense to serve the political interests of the Labor Party. Now, it wouldn't surprise me either if there be a change of government that they would choose to go elsewhere. Now, that's their choice. But the commitment is if they go, they will not be replaced at that position, but the replacement would be on the front line to deliver services to the front line. That is the commitment. That's what I was saying.
So how many jobs, Terry?
I've just given you the answer. No,
you haven't given any answers at all.
No, I'm talking about a commitment to turn the public service to its core business, and that's not serving the political interests of the government, but serving the interests of Territorians.
Apart from people on the fifth floor, now you're going to have, if you win government, you're going to have people in ministerial offices. Of course, there would be a total turnaround. But apart from those people, who are you talking about in the public service? Who's the political interests? I think that's pretty insulting to our public service. I don't know of anybody in the public service who's serving the political interests of the government.
No,
they're delivering
there might
services
be a few
and the policies
around your neck of the woods, but the issue is to make sure that all who are operating in the interests of Territorians, and that will be the focus
That's
of a
all
country.
18,000
That will be a well. There is a fair bit of effort being put in and resources going into the public service to promote the government. That would be making sure that we promote services to Territorians and not promote the government or have convoluted schemes that slow decision making down. I want swifter decision making so that we can get this show on the road and make sure the money is well spent. And there will be savings through making sure that the machinery of government works efficiently to service the interests of the community. And I'll be making sure that any decision that's made either at cabinet level or at the senior levels of any of our agencies, what difference does this decision make to a kid in a classroom or to the waiting queues at the hospital or to law and order on the street? Because you could take some of these agencies out, let's say for argument's sake, and it make no difference. So therefore that resource should be deployed to make sure there's a maximum difference in the classroom. And that's what I'll be determined to do, to make sure that in these difficult times that the dollars we're entrusted to spend are spent to make maximum benefit on the front line.
Terry, you just said you're going to take some agencies out. That's what you said. You said I'm going to take some of these agencies out. Which ones?
Hypothetically, if you were, would you notice them not there?
So let's move on to the issue of housing.
Who do you think's not doing a job?
Let's move on.
Here's where your axe is going to fall, Terry.
No, hang on.
Can we move on to the issue of housing?